So, year 9, how you doing? Hope you're coping with this working from home business, and hope you're all looking after each other out there. Hope you're feeling well as well. Hope everyone around you as well. Okay, so we're going to move on. I thought I'd try sticking to some things on YouTube. I thought that might change things up a little bit. So, can you start off, please, by copying into your books your title, your date, and your learning objective, please. If you could just copy those into your book, hit pause, and then come back when you're done. Okay, so as it says there, we're going to be looking at chapter 7 here today. Now, you may have already looked at the book and noticed that chapter 7 is really short. It's actually barely 2 pages long. So you might think, well, what use is that? Nothing happens in it. Well, it is actually quite a useful one for you. It's significant within the novel, and it's useful for you as you get ready for GCSE next year, because it's kind of it's a little bit longer than the extracts you'd get at GCSE, but it's a useful one to look at nonetheless. Anyway, let's start off with some reading. So can you first of all just either read through chapter 7 in the books you've got, or if you want to read along with that recording, I think I gave you this last time. I'll put a link to it down in the description of this video as well. But it's that recording I used last time. If you start from what's that? Is that 1 hour, 5 seconds, something like that, I think. Then that should take you straight to chapter 7. Okay, hit pause, come back when you're done. Okay, cool, all sorted? Nice. Right, can you please, so as I said, yeah, so the sort of question you might get in your literature paper next year, and actually in your end of year 9 exams. Now I'm working on the basis that there will still be some kind of exam. I don't know when it will be, and I don't know how it will take place, but I am thinking that there will be something. So we still need to be ready for it. So a question you might get will look a bit like this. So you'll get a question or a statement, and it'll point you towards an extract and then ask you about it. So Stevenson's presentation of Dr. Jekyll allows the reader to feel sympathy for him. Starting with chapter 7, explore how far you agree with this opinion. Write about how Stevenson presents Dr. Jekyll in this extract, and how Stevenson presents Dr. Jekyll in the novel as a whole. Okay, so today really we'll probably just focus on the extract, but if you do know the novel as a whole and you've kind of got a nice understanding of the novel already, maybe you've read it already, then you can talk about the novel as a whole, but you know, and I don't mind if you just stick to the extract today. Okay. So, you might remember from year 8, when we were getting ready for your exams at the end of year 8, and I asked you to think about that tricky question 4. I don't know if you remember it. It was a long evaluation one. I asked you to pay close attention to the way a writer uses the following. So, setting, characterization, structure, imagery, language, and dialogue. Okay. These are really useful tools. Difficult to remember. You might maybe you remember this mnemonic that I suggested, which was Sid can't swim in leather dungarees. Okay, that's the bit that people remember easily, but remember this is the useful bit for you. Okay, so what are these? Well, these two, all stories include these two. They have to. All stories have to have a setting. They have to have some kind of character in there. It doesn't have to be a person, you know, it can be an animal, or it can even be the weather. But there's always some degree of setting and some degree of characterization. Okay, so those top 2 are really important to you whenever you look at any prose extract. These bottom 4 are some of the tools that writers use to create the top 2. So they might, for instance, show through structure a setting getting progressively darker or something, or they might use imagery throughout, so you know, that's personification, metaphor, simile, that kind of thing. Language choices, okay, the sound of words that are used, maybe also dialogue. Dialogue is great for showing characterization. So really, really important, worth remembering. Right. So I can ask you now just to take a quick look at this extract. This is a shorter extract from chapter 7. I'll send you this as well. Now, if you want to print this out and annotate it, that's fine, but you don't have to. Honestly, it's an unnecessary use of your printer ink, I'll be honest with you. So it's enough for you to have a read through this on screen, and just spend maybe 5 minutes just thinking about, well, what might you say? Think about how structure is used. Think about how, sorry, I'll take that back. Think about how setting and characterization are used to make me feel sympathy for Jekyll. So just pause. If you want to jot a few notes down in your book at this stage, that's absolutely fine, but we'll do that more formally in a second. But just hit pause, come back in about 5 minutes. Okay, so can I ask you now, just copy that question into your books. It's the one we've been looking at so far, the one about sympathy for Dr. Jekyll. Copy that into your books, and then what I'm going to ask you to do afterwards, probably better if you've got a full page. If you've started and you're halfway through a page, it might be worth you thinking about going over onto a full page, because I'm going to ask you to produce something that looks a little bit like this. So agree with that statement, disagree with that statement, and then you're going to make some notes on setting, and you're going to make some notes on characterization. Okay, and I'll come back to that table in a moment. But yeah, I want you to copy that table, and we're going to be thinking about how structure, imagery, language and dialogue are used to present ideas about setting and characterization. So if you can copy that question and that table, and again hit pause, come back when you're done. Okay, so just to give you an example, the kind of thing I'm going to ask you to write in, because I'm just going to give you maybe 5 or 10 to just do a little bit of jotting notes into this table now. And you need to think about, well, do you agree with it or do you disagree with it? So here's an example. So I'm going to talk about pathetic fallacy. Now I could talk about this as being language or imagery maybe. But the sky was bright with sunset. So the pathetic fallacy suggests that it's actually quite nice outside, and yet poor old Jekyll is locked away. Yeah, something maybe we can all relate to at the moment. It's a beautiful day outside, and yet poor old Jekyll isn't allowed to leave his house for one reason or another. So perhaps he was an early adopter of social distancing, I don't know. Anyway, so if you can just take a little bit of time, go back to the extract if you want, go back to look at chapter 7, and just jot a few notes down as to how setting is used to make me feel sympathy for Jekyll, and how characterization is used to make me feel sympathy for Dr. Jekyll. You might find it difficult to disagree things at the moment, but you might find that easier if you have read the whole novel. So if you've read the whole novel and you think, well, actually I don't feel any sympathy for him, maybe just jot some things down from there, just ideas from elsewhere in the novel. Okay, so again, hit pause, come back when you've got a few ideas in your book. I would say don't spend more than, certainly don't spend more than 10 minutes on this. Between 5 and 10 minutes, just pop in some notes in your book, please. Okay, see you in about 5 or 10. Okay, so here's just a few ideas I noted when I annotated this extract. And I say, if you spotted these yourself, ace, well done. Don't worry if you didn't, but some ideas that might be useful. Just talk through a few of them. So I've mentioned that pathetic fallacy already. Well, I could talk about the imagery here, the imagery of this halfway open window. So it's as though Jekyll, he can see out, but he can't get out. He's almost there. And that makes me feel quite frustrated and I do feel a little sympathy for him there. And also the imagery here, the simile of this disconsolate prisoner. Talk about characterization, the way Utterson is characterized. He's very cheerful, Utterson. What? Jekyll? Exclamations there. He cried. He seems very, enthusiastic. And yet, Jekyll's response drearily sighed. So everything about Jekyll is very, very sad. You can have a look at these yourself in time, but another couple of bits and pieces. And one thing I really like, actually, I love this moment here. So, returned the doctor with a smile. So he's gone from drearily sighed, and then he smiles. And yet, the words were hardly uttered before the smile was struck out of his face. So just that tiny second of happiness, and it's snatched from him quite violently. And actually, if we look on structurally, you could talk about there's a real change in the vocabulary here at this point. Okay, abject terror and despair, froze the very blood. The window was thrust down. Okay, so again, all this violent vocabulary actually makes Jekyll come across as quite a victim. As I've said, he's characterised as a victim. Okay, so maybe you've added to your table a little bit from some of those ideas, but hopefully you had quite a few of those yourself anyway. So, right, well, hopefully you've still got time. I'm kind of working on the basis that you might have about 20 minutes left this lesson. I hope you have. Please don't go beyond the hour. I know some of you guys often do. I'm not naming any names. But please, yeah, don't go beyond the hour, but hopefully you've got about 20 minutes left, because I'd like to write a response to this question. Okay, so begin by explaining to what extent you agree or disagree with it. So I very strongly agree with the fact that the reader feels sympathy for Dr. Jekyll. You might want to, in your opening paragraph, prove that you know a little bit about context. So you could say, you know, in Stevenson's 19th century Gothic novella, the reader is encouraged to feel sympathy for Dr. Jekyll. You could also talk about literary context. I can't remember if we discussed the literary tradition of the transgressive protagonist, the Gothic tradition of the transgressive protagonist. If we didn't talk about that, that's something you could maybe look up and see if how much Jekyll falls into that. Anyway, as I've said, begin by explaining to what extent you agree or disagree, then aim for 3 or 4 paragraphs expanding on the ideas from your table, and each square from your table could be another paragraph. I'll just give you some idea of what one of these main paragraphs might look like, and you can use this if you want. This is certainly one idea, but you could add, I expect, quite a few more. So, yeah, it's just about there. So Stevenson's use of characterisation is very effective in generating sympathy towards Jekyll. There is a clear contrast between Utterson, who is presented as a cheerful character, and Jekyll, who is characterised to be very unhappy. Utterson speaks with a smile and cried out to the doctor, and yet Jekyll speaks drearily and sighed his responses. Stevenson's juxtaposition between these two characters is effective in generating sympathy for Jekyll, as we are left feeling that there is almost a barrier from preventing him from interacting with his friends. So, well, I start there very clearly by talking about characterisation. I'd like to see either that word or setting in each paragraph. Okay, I've spoken very deliberately about what Stevenson's doing, so it's Stevenson's use of characterisation, Stevenson's juxtaposition. Okay, I've spoken about the fact that there is this clear contrast. Okay, so I'm talking about how these ideas are put across. Okay, and it's important that you explain how Stevenson gets his ideas across. My quotations here are very short and embedded into my my answer, so that's something I want to see. And I've also tried to use a little bit of terminology here, so juxtaposition. Okay, so just try and give yourself up to 20 minutes. I mean, if the lesson runs out of time before then, that's fine, but up to 20 minutes, please. Aim for a kind of a, like I say, 3 or 4 paragraph answer, maybe that opening, and then 3 more paragraphs would be great. Okay, see what you can do, hit pause, and then come back when you're done. Okay, and that's what's done for the day. So what I would like to do today, please, is just see an example of the work you've been doing. So if it's possible, you could scan your work if you've got a scanner at home. If not, just get your phones out. If you could take a photo of, I just need that final answer really. I don't need your grid, but the work you did for that final, the extended 20-minute writing, please. It'd be really nice if you could send me that through, just so I can keep an eye and check you go in the right direction really. That'd be great. Okay, thanks very much. If you could send those off to me, and I will see you for a lesson tomorrow. Okay, cheers guys. Thank you. Bye.